They said he was a strong and most gifted man of God that ever lived on the surface of the earth, performing unimaginable miracles that keeps the audience marveling. His aura was a seeming presence of heavenly dominance. His remarkable ability of clairvoyance was testimonial, and he spoke fire into the demonic kingdom and broke the chains of captivities. While some people marveled, some people wondered, did he prayed and performed his miracles in the name of Jesus Christ, or in his own name? Christian faithfuls were taught to believe and uphold the name of Jesus above every other name. But with Apostle Tarquata, fondly called Apostle TK, people are easily reminded of the declaration by Jesus Christ that, "Greater things will men do, than he did." Now, what about the faction of populists that still remind the people about all the atrocities and damaging propagandas that surrounded Apostle TK? Do we really have to dismiss the mass burial grave in which hundreds of members of his congregation were buried on an island, while he alone came back home alive? Did God really save him alone as he had claimed, or did such great magnitude of spiritual power that he possessed, demanded hundreds of human sacrifice at once, to give him the momentum and powers he needed? Apostle TK certainly was not a true man of God, but how do you convince the world to believe you? And how did the world become so gullible and vulnerable to accommodate and associate themselves with the atrocities and cold-blooded deeds that took place under their nose? Yet they heaped praises and openly invited more followership. Wondering what is common knowledge among his congregation is the fact about the mysterious glowing of his altar at midnight of every first day of the month, with disturbing noise around the altar. Yes. His altar glows mysteriously in the middle of the night of every first day of the month. Everyone knew about it. But no one has done anything about it, and no one had dared to speak out. The question is, did all the members of his congregation take a vow of silence, or they are simply under a spell that must not be broken? The world has witnessed on several occasions where church members always take their stance to fight for, and defend their pastors whenever their evil deeds are exposed. Not just out of blindness, but most of the time, it is always out of their personal commitment to a dubious circle, where evil thrives naked in broad daylight. But every evil has its lifespan, and the bigger the stage the louder the disgrace. Before I let you know the simple stage of the fall of Apostle TK, in the hands of a simple 7-year-old boy that rarely prayed, nor goes to church. The magnitude of his fall, and the gloomy cloud of a nation and his followers, you really need to know some of the things that people dared not speak about. Let's talk about it the way it all started. Apostle TK was a man of flair and glamour, exuding an aura of greatness and what gave the impression of holiness. Men and women, family and children traveled far and wide across cities and borders, to attend his crusades in search of miracles. Healings and wonders manifested among men. Was it their faith and their beliefs? Or, was it all the great deeds of Apostle TK? The fact that he emerged and stationed his ministry in the heart of Africa, made a lot of people to wonder if it was the end of days for all mankind. With Africa being the beginning, it could as well be destined to be the end, for human race. Was Apostle TK the last of the Messiah to lead mankind to Judgment Day? People wondered and wondered out loud with fears of end time. The government respected him and honored him, especially for the economic proceeds that it gains from people coming into the country to seek his attention, and what seemed like a pilgrimage. Apostle TK has raised the deaf at countless times, healed the sick, restored sight to the blind, made people's business to boom in profits, unexpected profitable contracts to his members, improvements of lives and welfare of his devoted followers. He was almost worshipped by some, as a god. TK was a terror in the kingdom of darkness, who visibly destroyed demons in frightening warfare, while his audience watched with fear and praises. But now, it is still difficult to argue that the devil actually gave him power to destroy demons. Any kingdom that is divided against itself is bound to fall. So, what was this all about? Could it be that Apostle TK was truly a man of God? Or, he was a fake apostle that was gradually losing his footings and destroying his own? Do you know that, every construction worker that were involved in the construction of the altar in his church, mysteriously vanished? With the exception of Mr. Collins, who fell sick and couldn't go to work the very day that the rest of his team disappeared. Unfortunately, Mr. Collins only lived to die another day. 5 years after the construction of the church, Collins fell ill in his secret hideout. Just before he died, he confessed to have received a huge sum of money with his colleagues to bury 4 virgin girls alive in the foundation of Apostle TK's church, particularly under the altar. Collins died the following day, and his confession and the news were swept under the carpet. But some people still remembered. Now, let's see how the mighty Apostle TK, the self-acclaimed man of God, was exposed and brought to his knees. It was a midweek service in his church, the headquarter, which is often referred to as the cathedral. Wednesdays at 4 p.m., men and women rushed to the church to secure a good sitting position anywhere near the front seats. Not everyone enjoyed sitting far behind, where they are made to watch on the television screen to follow up the proceedings in the church. While everybody would have loved to be in attendance, it was mostly office managers and self-employed entrepreneurs that were able to leave their place of business early enough to attend the 2 hours midweek service, which starts from 5 p.m. and ends at 7 p.m. The crowd never diminished, as visitors and new members struggled for opportunities to receive their miracle on every occasions. But what they did not know was the fact that earth-shattering secret was about to shake the nation on that very day. As usual, the crowd was hard to ascertain the correct population of the total attendant. And also, as usual, the service was successful. A lot of soul-lifting press worships and testimonies, cheers and thanksgivings. Mountain-moving prayers, which is usually the high point of the midweek service. It was usually followed, or blended into moments of healings and miracle. This fateful day was not different. A blind woman regained her sight. A demon was visibly seen running and trying to escape from the church building, but Apostle TK commanded it down to bow to its destruction. While the congregation intensified their prayers against the destruction of demons. But then, could it be that the intensity of the prayers of the innocent faithfuls had a significant impact against their leader, Apostle TK? It wasn't the first time that they did such prayers, but what really went wrong? This will be very interesting. Please stay tuned and find out if his exposition and fall was his own mistake, or it was God's appointed time to bring justice. Just after some designated church workers ushered in a crippled woman on wheelchair to the front of the altar for prayers. TK simply and hurriedly healed the woman and she was able to walk again, instantly. Without crutches or any form of support. TK looked exhausted, but understandably, the crowd of followers attributed his exhaustion to his warfare against the demon that he just destroyed. And soon, there was thanksgiving and offertory collection. Then, the service came to an end. And that was when his own problem started. As the service ended, the church workers hurried to tidy up and round up for the evening. Mama Kunyaya was a middle-aged grandmother who also dedicated her time in the church services. She came with her grandson, Daniel, a 7-year-old boy who was forced to spend the week with his grandmother, Mama Kunyaya, while his parents traveled with his little sister. The innocent boy stood quietly beside the entrance to the workers' chamber of the church, while waiting for his grandmother. Daniel hardly goes to church, and was not used to what seemed to him a rowdy environment. Just then, Mama Kunyaya came out and led him by the hand as they walked towards the front of the building. But when they got to the front, they found themselves behind Apostle TK, addressing and bidding farewell to a small crowd of the rich and famous who always wait behind to pay homage to the apostle. She instinctively held on tight to little Daniel's hand, and gently squeezed their way through the people to leave. She respectfully said, "Good night," to TK as she passed beside him. Apostle TK responded casually, but his attention was drawn to little Daniel, his nemesis. TK called her back, wondering and looking at the boy she was holding. "Mama, I didn't know that you had a boy child," he said. "Yes, Apostle. He is my grandchild." "He just came to spend the week with me," Mama said. While the onlookers turned their attention on Daniel, TK made the worst mistake of his life. He should have known, or at least, had a little premonition. TK took a step forward. "Young man, how are you?" he asked as his hand reached out to touch the boy. The moment his hand landed on the little boy's shoulder, TK was instantly flung by an unseen but powerful extraordinary force that landed him on the wall of the church building, and he fell to the ground. Everyone scattered and ran away with fear, leaving Daniel standing alone in the middle. Daniel looked at TK with an indifferent expression on his face. Then he turned around in search of his grandmother, who was partially concealed in the frightened distant crowd. The shouts and commotion had attracted more people as the other church workers rushed out to witness what was happening. Some of the embarrassed young men rushed to help TK to his feet, but Daniel warned with calm authority. "Leave him alone. Don't touch him." The young men retreated. But Apostle TK, who was still struggling to regain his composure, was not aware of what just happened and what he was getting himself into. That boy. Take him to the altar. Take him," TK was saying, and the young men made to grab little Daniel, but there was an invisible wall, and they couldn't get close. Daniel, who seemed to have understood why TK wanted him on the altar, simply walked slowly in little strides into the church. The moment he climbed into the church, all the lights in the church automatically turned on. The people were bewildered as they looked questioningly at one another. Daniel went straight to the altar and stood, staring directly at the altar without any word. Meanwhile, TK was so confident of the power that revolved around his altar, and was so sure that his altar was the only solution for him to redeem himself. But then, was that his second mistake of the night? At first, he should have just allowed the little boy to leave peacefully with Mama Kanyaya. Now, they were at his altar. He knew that he needed to save his face. He knew that there was always the media presence that had so far helped him boost his popularity through viral videos on social media. He thought of concocting a plausible statement to the media men before stepping into the church, but his sense of composure failed him woefully. He staggered into the church, and the frightened teeming crowd followed him closely with endless prayers against demonic powers. Casting and binding. They hid behind Apostle TK, believing that he was their own shield against evil forces. If they had known the truth, would they be praying? Was their own prayer joining forces to weaken their own leader? TK got himself to the altar and regained some confidence, but cautioned himself not to get too close to little Daniel. From his usual position on the altar, he picked up red handkerchief and whipped his face. Then he started to speak in tongues, but little Daniel said calmly to him, "Shut up. I did not tell you to talk. You only talk when I tell you to talk." The people were astonished at that, and began to wonder. Then Daniel turned around and looked at the crowd who were already standing inside the church. And they were all quiet and attentive. No one was willing to miss the quiet words that were coming from the little boy, which was easily having a commanding effect on their own most powerful shepherd. "Confess now," Daniel commanded, but a panicking TK moved from side to side with thick sweat running down ceaselessly from his head. His red handkerchief was no longer powerful and very useless to him when it couldn't dry his sweat. "Confess now," Daniel commanded again. TK charged, but his strength became instantly deflated. At that point, the crowd was not only shifting their support, but also gradually embracing the shocker in front of them. Little Daniel looked at the altar and said, "Show yourself now." Immediately, 4 spirit figures emerged in front of the altar. There was a pandemonium in the church as everyone ran for the door. But all the doors slammed shut at the same time and no one was able to leave. There was a grave silence inside the church. Suddenly, the spirit figures gradually changed to recognizable persons. TK jumped up with fear and stood at the side of the altar. At that point, some members of the church were already confirming what had long remained a rumor in the church. Like a dark veil had just been dragged off their awareness. They almost seemed to have come to terms with the truth about what was going on in that instant. Apostle TK changed and metamorphosed to a dark monstrous creature. His shirt became too tight and tore in places because of his inflated size. The attentive crowd leapt in fear. But Daniel stretched out his hand toward the creature, and it fell on the floor and returned back to human, in person of Apostle TK. The crowd gasped in between fear and amazement. The 4 virgin girls that were said to have been buried alive over years ago, became quite visible and familiar. At the command of little Daniel, Apostle TK began to tremble on the floor of the church, due to invisible fire that was burning all over him. "I will confess. I will confess. It's true, I did them all." He surrendered and admitted to the obvious. Then, still panicking, he tiredly began to confess, and his endless list of confessions were not only scary revelations. They were annoying, misleading, implicating, and incriminating. With the magnitude of his atrocities and sacrilegious wrongdoings, the infuriating and sorrowful crowd commonly realized that, taking his life at that spot was not enough to atone for his deeds. While they were still contemplating with bitterness, they did not even realize that the person of TK, whom they know as their leader and apostle of God, was not even a human being. His eyes had become dark. His palm became elongated, and his body started transforming as he tried to stand to his feet. But little Daniel stretched his right hand again and TK fell back to the floor. Then, he disappeared. The people gradually and slowly approached the scene and Mama Kanyaya ran to Daniel, knelt on both knees and hugged him tightly with a huge sigh of relief. Others gathered around little Daniel and were confused about the best way to relate with him. They all knew that he was divinely empowered in a great deal. They wondered if he was a prophet, or an angel of God. But who was this little boy in their midst? They wondered. Chief Kalanta, one of the rich client of TK, who has invested and practically owe his life to TK, was seriously fuming with rage. "Where is he?" the man asked, and his face was visibly red in anger. His name came up as part of TK's confession. That his lovely wife that disappeared a year earlier was actually kidnapped and used for sacrifice by TK himself. Yet, they were best of friends. "Where is he?" the enraged Kalanta asked again. Daniel looked up at him. He was not a human being. He has gone back to the pit of hell, where he belonged. But, break the inner door of the altar and you will see something. Some of the men, mainly the church workers, followed Kalanta and broke down the door. Some of them ran back immediately. They succeeded in breaking down the door, but Kalanta stood, staring down at what they saw inside the dark tiny room. Another wave of fear grabbed the people, but Daniel calmly said, "Don't be afraid. That is the body of the real TK from 5 years ago." "I don't care," Kalanta said, and dragged out the body to an open field in front of the church. As though a veil had just been pulled off and clarity began to set in, people began to realize that they had never heard him pray and mention the name of Jesus Christ. With the help of the church workers, they got some fuel and set the body ablaze. Everyone dispersed with heavy hearts and too much to talk about. Not without regretting how deep they had all been misled. Some of the young women continued to cry, because amongst the confessions that TK had made, he mentioned that the destiny of every female chorister had been stolen to sacrifice as pillars for his ministry. At that instance, the truth about the real reason why most of the pillars in the church building were openly dedicated and named after some female members of the choir. The evening church service eventually ended in a grand style. But what about the church itself? By Thursday morning, which was just the follow morning, the huge International Cathedral Church, which was a significant landmark structure in that part of the city, was completely burnt down to its ruin. No one knew who did it, nor how. Nobody saw it burning at any point in time. But the crowd that gathered that morning were only amazed at the heap of ashes that piled from a burnt-down building.